Welcome to Dyslexic Life with Joe Reese, the podcast, Season 3, Episode 15. And I enjoyed recording it last week, so I thought I would record it again this week. This time, not live streaming across everywhere, just YouTube. But yeah, I thought it was quite good to have a little visual that went with it. So how are you all? What has been going on in your world this week? For me, it is the first full week back at school. And I actually find this week worse than the first week, because this is the week that the extracurricular stuff starts and the week where school kind of really kicks in. So, in terms of getting back into that routine, we're still trying to get our head around the routine, like the new routine. But then on top of that, we are also trying to deal with the fact that by this point, we're feeling a bit tired, the reality of the fact that this is what the next few weeks are going to look like. So yeah, it's been interesting. And this time of year is always really quite busy for me, assessment wise. So what has been going on for me professionally this week? So there's been report writing, but there's also been quite a lot of mentoring happening, which I'm really, really, really enjoying. So Rebel Up, my one-to-one mentoring program, is really kind of gaining momentum at the moment. And I'm just loving having conversations with people, helping them unpick how their brain works or why they're struggling with certain things. It is proving to be really, really, really powerful. I've got a couple of people now that have signed up. So the first session is all about learning to love your dyslexic brain and how it works. And it's been a super positive kind of session with people kind of picking up on that. The other thing that's been really lovely is the Parent of Dyslexic community that I'm just running throughout September. There is still time to join that if you wanted to. We've had some really good calls in there, kind of digging deep, unpicking what's been going on for kids. So that kind of like tired meltdown that they have kind of a week in, unpicking why that might be happening and what as a parent we can put in place to support that. And then I have also I've talked a lot about, and I've talked about it before, the fact that, as assessors, we have to do a certain amount of CPD to keep our practising certificates. And I've been really trying to sort that out and focus on that. I'm not very good at doing that as I go along, and my certificate is due for renewal soon. So I've been trying to get my head around that. So there's been a lot of kind of training, I guess, happening in the background. So I've been quite quiet on social media this week because you can only do so much. But I think underpinning all of that is parenting as a dyslexic ADHD person, and how you support your children and how you manage to keep on top of life while absorbing some of their stress. Because the other huge thing that has happened for me this week is my middle child has headed off to university. We took her on Tuesday and it all went super smoothly. It was all fine. But it wasn't until I stopped on Wednesday that I realized that had been taking up really quite a lot of my headspace for really quite a long time, not quite as long as May and since she's been on study leave, but it has been hanging over me for quite a long time. And I don't mean hanging over me in a negative way, but like there's just been lots of additional things to sort out. She has been quite independent in what she sorted out, but there's just been a lot of thinking going on in my background. And on Wednesday, obviously, I do feel super sad that she's not here, but I'm pleased for her that she's starting this next chapter of her life and she feels really ready for that. But I kind of felt a bit emotionally drained from the point of view I suddenly realized that it had actually been taking up quite a lot of my headspace and had been impacting how I had been able to kind of function and work and how much I've been able to do for really quite a long time. And I kind of felt this sense of freedom, I guess, if you like, on Wednesday, and as much as it freed up a bit of space. And I think it's one of the things that I hadn't really realized about dyslexia and ADHD and parenting until that point. Like, I'm still learning and evolving all the time, but how much we absorb our children's worries and how much, even when we've created independent children, how much space they take up in terms of not physical space, but emotional space, and how that can really vary as the year goes on, but how that really impacts us in how we're able to function and how we're able to cope. So that was quite an interesting observation for me. The other thing I realized through conversations with teachers this week is how much I potentially mask my children's weaknesses and neurodiversities on the day-to-day because we've got the strategies in place and because of the structure I put in place. So all of my children and me, we're really independent. We've got lots of strategies in place, but I hadn't realized until I was talking to another professional that a lot of the structure and a lot of the things that I put in place, parents don't necessarily have in place. I just assume that they would have them in place, but actually a lot of the support and a lot of the structure that I have in place potentially masks their dyslexia and ADHD. So teachers aren't aware of how much they struggle or how much they're over delivering. And let's come back to that word over delivering in a minute, because that's a discussion for in a minute. How much they're over delivering, because I've got structures and support in place that enable them to kind of keep on top of stuff. I talk a lot about in my social media and when I'm giving feedback, when I'm mentoring people, about how when we're neurodivergent, we need to be proactive rather than reactive. So it's about having those strategies in place to preempt and stop the overwhelm from happening. So that was a bit of a realization for me, actually, that perhaps what I do for my children isn't typical of what other parents would do. And I guess also talking to parents in the pod, not this pod, but the Parents of Dyslexic community, pop-up community, it's kind of made me realize that actually I do have a lot of strategies and I do have a lot of things that I can teach people that potentially they're not already doing. So that was quite interesting for me. And I think parenting, being a dyslexic ADHD parent and parenting dyslexic ADHD children, I'm kind of sensing that's going to be a real theme in the work that I'm doing this year, for many reasons. But I actually delivered my keynote speech, Parenting Successful Dyslexics, last night to Wiltshire Dyslexia community online, which was really good. And I'm actually delivering that presentation twice more in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to be in Twickenham next week at Katrina's Positive Dyslexia Ltd conference in Twickenham. So if any of you are listening and near there are still tickets available. So please do go and check. Please do go and check that out. And so that's going on. And I'm also talking at Bell House School. I think that's what it's called, Bell House School in Dulwich. On a Saturday, I'm also doing a keynote there about parenting and dyslexia. That's going to be more geared towards lowering anxiety and supporting mental health, kind of that real proactive level. But yeah, so it seems that parenting dyslexics is a real theme that's going on at the moment in my life. But I want to come back to that word overwhelm. So in the podcast last week, I think I talked about it in the podcast, how many times GCSEs were mentioned on my daughter's first day back at school. And that post, actually, I've never had a post go viral on LinkedIn before, but I think you could probably class it as going kind of semi-viral on LinkedIn. And whenever anything, I've learned that when anything gets any traction, you promote discussion and you almost invite conflicting views, which is fine, because I don't claim to have the right to everything. But what was really interesting is some of the comments underneath were really quite judgmental of my parenting and what I did, and really taken out of context. And I did, the first couple of people I did block, because sometimes I just find it easier to just block and make them go away if I feel like that you're never going to be able to make your voice heard. But if I feel like somebody is going to listen to me, then I will engage, as in not listen to me, because it's not about trying to make somebody agree with me, but see my perspective and see where I'm coming from. And one of the comments I blocked was, they basically said that over delivery didn't exist and that it was another way of dressing up lazy. Basically, over delivery was hard work, and anybody that uses the word over delivery is scared of hard work and actually it's another word for lazy. If you don't want to work hard, then you're lazy. So as you can imagine, that made me feel quite frustrated. But I did create another post on LinkedIn a bit later on, asking the question as to whether people really felt that over delivery was a thing, or was it a made up term? All I know is, from my perspective, having carried out a lot of dyslexia assessments, a lot of dyslexia assessments, and having worked with lots of parents of children with dyslexia in pop-up groups I've had before, the people I'm working with at the moment, the people I'm mentoring, is that a sense of over delivery. But also, when I'm doing assessments, you can see that somebody's effort is not equaling their attainment. Like, they're having to work super hard in order to kind of not even attain average at times. Like, the compensatory strategies that they're having to put in to stay afloat, you can feel their effort, and their effort is not in line with what they're able to achieve. So that's really what I'm referring to when it comes to over delivery. And actually, that over delivery is exacerbated when people are forced to follow systems and routines and structures that don't work with their brain. Like, actually, sometimes dyslexic people adapt structures and approaches. And that's when sometimes adults get into trouble at work, because they're accused of cutting corners. But actually, for them, that way is working with their brain, and they're much more efficient working kind of with their brain than they are trying to follow a structure that is, causing them to over deliver. So please do let me know if you're watching this or listening. You can now comment on the podcast, I believe, or leave a message. What are your views on over delivery? Like, do you think it's real? Do you think it's made up? All I know is, from my experience, there is an element of effort not equaling attainment, for sure. And that results in low confidence and low self-esteem. So there was that comment, but then there was also a comment that I did engage in conversation with. And I really felt like there was some sweeping judgment comments about my parenting style in general. And I actually think that parenting a dyslexic child when you are dyslexic yourself is really tricky for lots of reasons. So parenting in general is tricky, but parents who are dyslexic and have not had a positive experience of education, there is a really fine line that you tread, because you don't want your children to have the same experience that you had, but equally they have to experience failure, and they have to learn to advocate for themselves in order to build resilience. But you don't want them to go so far over the line of failure that it negatively impacts confidence and self-esteem and stops them from taking risks in their learning and impacts their mental health, but so that they experience enough failure to be resilient and keep moving forward. It's a really interesting line to walk, for sure. A really, really, really interesting one. So again, I'm interested to know your thoughts on that. But I do really feel, as a parent, I'm not that parent, or I'm not that parent as much as I could be. And I hate that term, that parent, because actually all we're really doing at the end of the day is advocating for our children and what our children need to be successful. Well, I am anyway, from my point of view. Like, I don't feel like, when I do have conversations with school, I don't feel like it's about advocating for them to be seen. And for me, to be fair, I really skill my own children up, and the children that I mentor, to advocate for themselves. So if I'm getting involved, or a parent is getting involved, usually it's because they've tried to advocate for themselves and they haven't been heard, or they haven't been listened to. But one of the things I'd kind of realized, and I don't think I'd shared it in the podcast actually, is writing my book at the moment about navigating the education system. I've actually realized that I often don't speak up for my children when I perhaps should, and I should maybe speak up for them a bit more than I actually do. And again, that comes back to the structures and the systems and the things that I've got in place that potentially mask some of their weaknesses. So teachers are not aware of the full extent of their struggles. Potentially, it's an interesting discussion and thought, isn't it? But I do feel like I have created really resilient children. I do feel that my parenting style does definitely teaches them to advocate for themselves, but also encourages them to go out of their comfort zone. And, when you look at actually, one of my children I talked earlier in the year, she'd done an exchange and she'd gone somewhere completely different. They travel independently. They do regularly push themselves out of their comfort zone. I definitely don't helicopter parent or micromanage what they do. And I really felt like some of the comments under that post were being really judgmental. They were taking it very out of context. And it's something as a mentor of parents of dyslexic kids, and as a social media presence, I try really hard to provide a balanced view. And I actually feel like I do really advocate that parents need to empower their own children. I feel like that's my approach. Anyway, kind of talking myself around in circles now. The last thing that I had on my little piece of paper in front of me to talk to you about was the book. The book is coming along nicely. I am chipping away writing it and hope to maybe I am going to pitch it to a publisher, I think, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens with that. But yeah, at the moment, I'm just writing it. It's kind of been a bit on hold over the summer. Like I say, I kind of realized I've been very consumed with making sure that I enjoy spending like the last few days of the summer or whatever with the children, help them kind of get ready for uni. So I need to get back into a rhythm and a routine myself. And I think once the children are settled in their routine, I will find it then easier to get settled into a routine and get writing again, because I really do. I love writing, and I'm really looking forward to writing that book. And as I say, I think it's much needed. And I think, interestingly, parenting and dyslexia, I mean, Louise Selby has been saying for ages that is my real kind of unique selling point, if you like, and something that I'm really good at, simply because I've got that understanding of education, because I've been a teacher, because I've been a Senko, because I'm neurodivergent myself. When it comes to talking about parenting, I come from quite a powerful perspective. Anyway, if you're new to the podcast, please do go back and listen to previous episodes. I've not live streamed all of the episodes before. The first one I did was last week, but please do go back and listen to previous episodes. And all that is left for me to say is always look on the dyslexic side of life, because it's great. It's really, really great. Have a great week, guys. And I will see you next week.